RT, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, AJ. This is great. I'm excited to be here.
Man, no, I'm stupid excited to have you on the show. So we'll rewind just a little bit. So previously on the Analog Explorer, I had Karel Brachan from Barrelhand Watches because back in the day, I followed him early days when he was a young student in college because of my day job. And I found out about him in 3D printing. And at the time, about 10 years ago, almost to the date, I used to be teaching 3D printing workshops, and there was two companies in the watch fam that I would integrate into my university classes. One was Barrelhand, and the second was this upstart company out of Colorado known as Vortic Watches. And that is how I found you. And I reached out to you early days of back then because I absolutely loved what you and Tyler were doing. But before we go down that road, I've got to ask you, did Vortic really get started off of a golfing green? Is that how the business plan came together, really? Because that's what I used to say to my class.
Yep, no, it's totally accurate. Tyler and I were playing golf with a couple of our friends. We were studying at Penn State at the time. I was studying industrial engineering and he was studying mathematics. And he was a watch guy.
Nice.
And he had a little collection of like vintage Timex. We were college kids. We didn't have a whole lot of funds. But he liked Timex and still does. He's got a couple of really cool, vintage watches. Which have become way more popular now.
Oh, totally.
Forward 10 years, back then it was kind of like hip, to have these like, vintage, inexpensive watches. And he was wearing a watch while playing golf. And that sparked the conversation because I was just like, how do you swing a golf club with something on your wrist? Like, I don't even wear a glove when I play golf, which is probably a little weird, but like, I don't like anything in the way or distracting me. Call me a purist from a golf standpoint, but I was like, how is it not too tight? Is it not too loose? And it sparked this really cool conversation about just watches in general, like why he liked them so much, the engineering behind them. We had a bunch of engineering conversations about like how to get a strap a little bit tighter, a little bit looser. And make it fit better. And we had a bunch of ideas like that in the watch realm just on the golf course that day. And we took a few of those ideas back to Penn State and entered a couple business plan competitions and did a few school projects that involved watches. And that really got us into just doing research on the watch industry. And, to try to make a really long story short, we stumbled on the history of the old pocket watches that were made in America back then. Because while we were doing all this homework and these projects, we decided if we were going to make a watch or we were going to get into the watch industry, we would focus on made in USA. That was something that at that time there was four of us in like basically call it a college group project,
Yeah.
And just like any good group project, there's only two of us now. So,
Understand.
And there was really only two of us the whole time. But at that time, we had this little group and we had professors involved and we got all kinds of other feedback and ideas. But the core of it was like, let's make something in America and let's just see what's possible. And everyone told us, if you want to make a watch and you want to start a new watch brand, you're looking at China or Switzerland for the movement. And at this point, obviously, we can add Japan, and there's, but we were kids, we were uneducated in the watch world. That's what we were told. And because we were uneducated in the watch world, and we came at it from an engineering standpoint, we asked some really dumb questions. Like,
awesome.
Why? Why aren't watches made in USA? Were they ever made in USA? And that's what got us to the old pocket watches. And we stumbled on what we call the great American watch companies like Hamilton and Elgin and Waltham in Illinois. And, they made, back then, 100 years of production, 1850 to 1950. We were basically the Switzerland of the world, America was. But at that time, they were pocket watches.
Yeah.
And walked into a pawn shop to buy a pocket watch and kind of learn more about it and basically see if, again, stupid question time, see if we could make one. Like how is a movement made?
Right. That's an engineer speaking right there.
Right. And another stupid question, if they did it 100 years ago without freaking electricity, we had a fleet of Haas machines in the industrial engineering building at Penn State.
Yep.
Let's go, let's make some stuff. And I forget if it was there, but Tyler and I were in Philadelphia or somewhere in the outskirts of Philadelphia. We went to a couple pawn shops. We were playing with pocket watches, and a watchmaker
Hmm.
told us the history of all the companies. And then the light bulb went off because he also told us it was either that person or one of the owners of the pawn shop that people are scrapping pocket watches for gold and silver.
Yep.
And that's where the idea for Vortic came from. The actual first product, which we call the American Artisan Series, pocket watch turned into wristwatch. Everything on the inside is old, everything on the outside is new. And yeah, Kickstarter was almost exactly 10 years ago. It was November 17 of 2014. So
Yep.
here we are.
Dude. And so, I mean, that's cool. I didn't know about the pawn shop part. So that I'll have to correct my lecture if I ever go back to teaching those workshops. But no, so the thing that really interests me is that, I mean, the business plan in Penn State and being an academic, like that's how I tuned into y'all. Now, how did you come about manufacturing cases through 3D printing like that? Why'd you guys go that? I mean, yes, you're doing something right now at more boutique and more bespoke, but in those early days of that business plan, why'd you go that route and not, like you said, CNC it or turning them?
Yeah. So again, back to the stupid question time, and the engineer brain, creative problem solving. We didn't know at that time that there was any standardization of these pocket watch movements.
Right.
So I can go into that, and how the Vortic watch, product functions and works and why it's feasible.
Mm.
And really the root of that is because there was those old pocket watch companies standardized the sizes of the movements.
Mm.
But at that time, 10 years ago, really 11 years ago, when we kind of were just talking about the idea, we had no idea. We thought and we assumed that every pocket watch was going to be truly one of a kind and like totally different size and everything. And so 3D printing was the only way to solve that for a cost-effective means. Every watch was going to be one of a kind. Every case had to be basically 3D printed around each movement. That was the original concept, was not even small batch production, but literally one of one.
Yeah.
And so that's where, that's how we got into the idea of 3D printing and using it for the product. But I was introduced to metal 3D printing by a few of our professors, one in particular, Dr. Tim Simpson at Penn State, who is now, I mean, just renowned in that world, especially metal 3D printing. And he's researched that for, decades. And I forget if I was in a course with him or, if he was an advisor in some way. I can't remember exactly how we got connected, but I went to him for advice. And at that time, we were working on what we call version 1 of Vortic, which is a 2-piece case. So it was 2 like half moons that cantilevered over each other.
Yeah.
And had 2 screws in the back. And so it was like, we called it a sandwich. It was
That's cool.
really easy to design. We were working on a student version of SolidWorks back then. So we're just
Good
doing
old
the best we could with what we had.
Yep.
And that first product, and if you look at, the American Artisan Series on Kickstarter from 2014, it wasn't water resistant.
No.
It had a seam in the middle because it was 2 halves, like two sandwiches that came over and kind of, hugged each side of the movement. But creative problem solving, we solved the problem.
You solve for X.
Pocket watch into a wristwatch. And it looked cool and it was different. And at that time, the biggest problem was we were using a company called X1. And X1 used, I don't know the correct term for it. I keep referring to it as binder jet. But basically it was printed steel that was porous, almost like a sponge.
Right.
And then bronze was poured into it, and so
cool.
that it was printed steel infiltrated with bronze.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So it was this cool steel bronze mixture, which from a technology standpoint, awesome. It was really cost effective, but if you get a little too much bronze or a little more bronze in one side of the case than the other, they look different. And
doesn't match.
The color didn't match.
Yeah.
So we had to solve really 2 problems. One was trying to make that first product water resistant, because that was the biggest feedback we got from Kickstarters. Like, hey, this is cool. And, it's 100% American made. And, it's a pocket watch turned into a wristwatch. Like, everyone thought it was cool.
Yeah.
But it didn't look like a traditional watch, and it wasn't water resistant.
Okay, fair.
And so that was some of the questions I went to Dr. Simpson with, is just like, how do we do this? And we had a new design that was a little more traditional. It was a two-piece case, top and bottom. So a main case
Mm,
body and then a screw-on case back.
mm,
It involved a little bit of CNC machining. So we had to cut out the back and basically do post-processing. But
right.
we could 3D print that main case body.
Interesting.
And with that, we were looking into a newer process at that time, which was direct metal laser sintering.
Yeah.
And then we could mess with titanium.
Yes.
So I don't know if this is true, but I think we printed one of the first 3D printed titanium consumer products.
Well, I hope
We
so
were
because I
right
mentioned you guys
in
like
that
that.
realm.
So
Yeah. So I don't know if that's accurate. I know we were first in the watch industry.
yeah.
Um, Panerai says they were first. There was a Watch Time magazine article
Hmm.
in 2015 that was all talking about, Panerai and how they
Yeah.
were the first ones to use direct metal laser sintering in watches and stuff like that.
Oh,
And I'm
interesting.
reading the article and I'm like, they just they don't know who we are.
Yeah. Right.
Like,
They will after today, RT. Like,
yeah. I don't hold that against them
no,
or
that's
the
cool. I
writer of
will.
that. I was just like, oh, this is what that did was it was validating for me. I was like, oh, cool. People think this is interesting. Like, that's awesome. And if Panerai's doing it, like, maybe we're onto something.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that's what we call version 2
Okay.
is 3D printed titanium. It's a main full case body with a screw-on case back. It looks closer to the current Vortic product.
Mm.
And we started doing version 2 in 2016, probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe 2017
Yep.
is kind of in that realm.
Yep. That
And
would
for
match with my
reference,
workshops. Yep.
yep. And we launched on Kickstarter in November 2014. We didn't ship our first product of version 1 until May or June of 2015.
Mm.
So that
Okay.
was kind of the timeline of the iteration of the company and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that also matches up with like the boon that was 3D printing back then. I
For
mean,
sure.
everybody was trying it out. Everybody was doing weird things. Whether it was SLA or you're doing extrusion, like, or you're doing, like you were saying, doing metal printing. Like that was, heck, I even remember there was an article about, there was a researcher in Mexico using concrete and doing concrete
Mhm.
printing, like early
Yep.
days. Like everybody was trying to figure out how to use this to solve for X, different X's of different sizes. And I used you guys because here was a watch company in America using American made parts, authentic old school American made parts, and bringing it into the future. The other catch that I had about you guys is obviously being an academic, seeing you as students, and then developing this real life company. Now, when you founded Vortic, and I mean, was your guys' intent really to carry this forward? Was this just like you guys in college, wanting to do this as a project? I mean, did you always want to be an entrepreneur that you've kind of risen to become?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll answer that for myself. I
Yeah.
think, like I said, we had the idea on a golf course with 4 people. We all of the student projects, at Penn State were with 4 of us.
Mhm.
After we graduated from school, so mid 2014, it got whittled down to 2 of us. The 2 other guys, helped us get started, helped us
Mhm.
apply for some of our first patents, helped us win a
Got it.
couple grants, from Penn State for, we won a business plan competition. That was all really fun. But then they went off and got other jobs, and now they're living other lives. And I just talked to both of them recently to kind of celebrate some of our recent success and just catch up. One of them is also a dad now, and so
Mm.
he has a couple little kids like I do.
Represent.
So we
Yeah.
connected on that. Um, but they went off and wanted to do something else and live other lives. I moved to Colorado after I graduated Penn State, and I worked for Walmart in logistics engineering at that
Hmm.
time. And Walmart gave me the choice between Bentonville, Arkansas, and Loveland, Colorado. And so I chose Loveland, Colorado because
Nice.
Colorado's awesome.
Nice. Yeah.
Since I've met a beautiful wife, have 2 awesome kids, and I own this building that I'm sitting in right now. So
Right on.
to say I'm all in is a little bit of an understatement, but I'm not going anywhere. To answer your question though, um, you know, and how Tyler came along, I I wouldn't say I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur,
Okay.
but I was raised by entrepreneurs. And I would say I was and am destined to be an entrepreneur. Um, I'm a fourth generation farmer. I grew up on a Christmas tree farm in Pennsylvania. My great grandfather started the farm in 1941, and Christmas trees don't make any money anymore, and they stopped. Small farms really started to struggle in general, but Christmas trees, especially in the early 2000s. But I was selling trees and helping my parents and my grandparents run that business since I was about 5 years old. And they encouraged me throughout that whole time to go get a 4-year degree. Like, it was just assumed that I would go to college. I play with Legos a lot, so I think they were just like, "Oh, you're an engineer," And so that's how I got to Penn State. And I got a great degree from a great school. I have an industrial engineering degree from Penn State. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I got a fantastic corporate job. Like, I did all the things that were expected.
You did the things.
Right?
You did the things. Yeah, all the things.
Amazing corporate job right out of school for the world's largest retailer, doing the coolest thing. I was doing automated and storage retrieval systems for Walmart. It's crazy.
Cool.
But Tyler calls me, this was summer 2014.
Okay.
And he had a different job in Philadelphia, and he had come out to visit me in Colorado, and he was just like, "Hey dude, Colorado's awesome. I hate my job in Philly. You want to try that watch company we were talking about?" And and I was like, "Yeah, I got a great job. I bought a house here.
Side hustle."
And so for me, it was Vortic was a side hustle for that first 2 years, 2014 to 2016.
Got it. Cool.
And for Tyler, he was full time. And Tyler and I met through a very entrepreneurial company. We worked for one of those house painting, like it's called College Works Painting.
Oh, yeah.
College kids painting houses for the summer. That's how we met. We were both doing that. And so we kind of knew each other through entrepreneurial circles. And so it made sense. And we were like, all right, let's give it a shot. Started the Kickstarter. And then, we've sold every Vortic watch we've ever made since Kickstarter. And so, we just had a really good idea. And to your point, some of it's timing, some of it's luck. But I would say from my point of view, and for me, as soon as I really caught the bug of entrepreneurship, and as soon as Vortic really started to catch on, and I started connecting with our customers and seeing the joy in our customers' eyes when they're holding one of the only American watches, and seeing people like I'm describing how metal 3D printing works, and they're holding a watch and they're just like mind blown and light bulbs are going off. As soon as I fell in love with the Vortic business model, then I quit the corporate job and haven't looked back, and I could never work for somebody again.
Dude, you're the best boss, right? To yourself, right?
I treat myself just fine.
Good. As I'm seeing a lovely selection of fine bottles behind you, yes, you are treating yourself very well, sir. Very well.
Which is ironic. Almost all of those are full, and I don't drink. So the reason behind all of these, it all started with this one up here. It's a Springbank Scotch. Springbank is one of the only independent Scottish distilleries left. Similar to the watch industry, the Scotch industry is all conglomerates.
Yep.
And I was sitting in Campbelltown, Scotland, with my dad there to play golf when I was 21. And so I bought a 21-year-old bottle of Scotch, and what's in there is as old as I am. So that's how it started, as like a little collection. And I used to drink, but yeah, ever since I became a dad, and ever since I just am like fully all in here, I have 10 employees that rely on me every day. Like, I have to be on all the time. And so I don't really drink anymore. These are just fun.
Yeah.
But the
trophies.
real reason I like the trophies for sure. But the real reason I like the liquor industry is marketing. So I'm a student of marketing.
Got it.
And you have to sell your brand in 4 inches by 2 inches of space on a shelf with 500 other liquor brands next to you. And these are some of the best. These are some of the coolest bottles, some of the coolest brands, some of the most interesting things.
Some of the interesting stories.
Stand out. And it's stories. Exactly.
Yep. So I'm going to fast forward just a bit. So obviously you join, you get away from the big Walmart, you go into Vortic all in and stuff, and Vortic's popping on all cylinders. And at this point, I remember there was a Hodinkee article about the FTC coming down and cracking down on what we define as American made. And then the next thing I know, in one of the next classes that I'm teaching, here is a lawsuit against you guys. And I think this was like a 6-year battle.
Yep.
How did that come about? And, spoilers, you won. How?
Yeah. So, those are two different things.
Mm.
The Federal Trade Commission and a few other American watch companies for basically misrepresenting their watch. And it's why our tagline is America wasn't assembled, it was built. Shinola, for instance, imports components from around the world and assembles them in Detroit. You cannot call that American made.
Right.
And that's not a dig on Shinola. They employ hundreds of people in Detroit and create tons of American jobs. But the Federal Trade Commission is very serious about that. You cannot stamp made in USA on your product unless it's actually made here, which I am very thankful for them. But it's interesting that our lawsuit was right at the same time as all that was going on.
Yeah.
And we got sued by the Swatch Group.
Right.
And the Swatch Group sued us because we're taking pocket watches and turning them into wristwatches. And these pocket watches are made by the great American watch companies like Illinois, Elegant, Waltham, and Hamilton. And they say the original brand on the dial, right? Sure. So zooming out, for anyone that doesn't know watches, the dial is the face of the watch, then you got the hands, and then you got the movement, right? All those are the guts of the pocket watch. We at Vortic make everything else to turn that pocket watch into a wristwatch, but I don't make the dial. I don't make the face of the watch. That's 100 years old, and it still says Hamilton front and center. And we did that because we're celebrating these old brands. This is a piece of American history.
Heritage.
We're preserving American heritage. Exactly.
Yeah.
But the Swatch Group, who owns the Hamilton trademark, did not see it that way.
Right.
And we got a cease and desist about 2 months before we shipped a single product to a single customer. It was summer, or like late spring, I think roughly May of 2015 is when we got the cease and desist from Hamilton International, but technically the Swatch Group attorneys.
Right.
And at first we thought there was something wrong. Like it was just a miscommunication. Hey, we're honestly, we haven't shipped a watch yet, guys. Like, what? And then I realized we put an ad in Watch Time magazine. It was the May-June issue, 2015 at that point. May-June issue of Watch Time magazine, the US's largest wristwatch magazine. And it featured a Hamilton pocket watch turned into a wristwatch.
I vaguely remember that ad. Yeah.
And I thought it was a great ad.
Yeah.
It was my first marketing endeavor. I spent a lot of time writing the content on it and making sure it was very clear of what we do and how we do it. And, at the bottom it said Vortic really big, contact a watchmaker at Vortic to convert your watch today, something like that. All made sense to me. But Hamilton saw that and said, nope, can't do that. You're using our name to make money. And so they accused us of trademark infringement and counterfeiting. Trademark infringement, pretty straightforward, right?
That one I knew.
We're using their name to make money, or allegedly were. Counterfeiting, they thought we were actually putting the Hamilton brand on these watches.
That part I didn't know. Okay.
Or that we were like manufacturing some of the parts and then calling it a Hamilton.
Okay.
And so even after we cleared that up and they stated clearly what they were after and what they were, mad at us for, I still thought there's just, hey guys, this is a miscommunication. So I contacted everyone I could on LinkedIn. I reached out to everyone I could at Hamilton and at the Swatch Group. I even sent a personal letter to the CEO of Swatch, Mr. Hayek.
Yeah.
And I said, sir, I will come to you anywhere in the world, anytime, any day. You let me know. I want to buy you a cup of coffee. I want to put my watch in your hand, and I want to explain to you what we do, because I think it's a miscommunication, and you and I can handle this man to man. We don't need attorneys. What I was really saying is I can't afford an attorney, sir.
Yeah. Upstart, Kickstarter. Yeah,
I'm
put
like
the pieces together.
You dog.
Yeah.
Come on. Give me a break. And it turned into no laughing matter, unfortunately. It took 6 years from that point until we defeated them in federal court in the appellate court in the Southern District of New York. It was a big deal. I mean, one of the watch industry's most prominent David and Goliath stories, I think. And still, just even today, I look at it as a miscommunication. Like it's just, and the way I describe it to my friends and anyone who asks is, honestly, at the end of the day, it came down to just a few really hard conversations
Yeah.
between me and the chief anti-counterfeiting officer of the Swatch Group. Which,
Oh.
by the way, if you have a chief anti-counterfeiting officer
Hmm.
in your company, you have bigger fish to fry than some kid in Colorado
Colorado.
making at this point still no more than 300 watches a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, but they kept coming after us. We went through 4 different attorneys because I couldn't afford to pay the attorneys, so they worked as long as they could, and then they stopped working. And on my last attorney, I finally found someone who was just willing to take it all the way and basically work for free for like almost 2 years. His name's Rob Lance.
Hmm.
Shout out to Lance Law in Denver, Colorado.
Totally.
When I called him the first time, he heard how sad and lost I was, and he told me that he thought I was going to kill myself if I didn't win this case, which I've never had those thoughts, but because he had those emotions, or because his gut said like, I
Yeah.
need to help this human. It wasn't about the law.
Right.
It was about me, now he's one of my best friends. um, and I mean, it makes me emotional to think about it. Like he did in a lot of ways save my life, save my business. We got the official lawsuit, like when it went from cease and desist to full on federal lawsuit. We received the lawsuit paperwork about 3 weeks after my first son was born. I'm sitting in the parking lot in my new Jeep because I I sold my used car to get enough cash to make payroll, and then I leased a new car because new car leases were so inexpensive from a monthly standpoint that I ended up getting several $1,000s in cash, put that into the company, and I basically floated myself by leasing a car. Plus, I needed a bigger car because I was a dad now. I need
Yep.
car seats. I had a little
Yep.
car. And I'm sitting there in my Jeep, and I Googled, the way I found Rob was I Googled Colorado's best bankruptcy attorney. And I was giving up because I was
Whoa.
just like, there's no way. And my business partner, Tyler, and I had some very hard conversations, and he and basically everyone in my life advised that I at least look into that, and just see what happens. And I found my way to Rob, and he's not a bankruptcy attorney. He's actually a litigator that goes after people who like big companies who file bankruptcy that don't need to. They're just trying to get out of something, so they file bankruptcy, false
Yeah. False.
pretenses, whatever.
Yeah.
And his partner at the time, his legal partner at the time, was a trademark expert. So he was like, "I got you. Let's go take on Goliath." And that was the biggest inflection point in my life. And yeah, like I said, changed everything for us. And it was 2020, September. So February of 2020, I was sitting in Manhattan in federal court, which not the best time to be in Manhattan.
No. 2020
I
was.
realized that when I got home and I got really sick and they didn't know what to call it. But
Yep.
that was another massive inflection point in my life. And Rob, the attorney, he said, when you get up on the stand and you're talking to the judge, keep talking unless she tells you to stop, because you have not done anything wrong. There are multiple things to protect you. One, what you do is an art. Taking a pocket watch, turning a wristwatch, they're all one of a kind. That's art, and art is protected under federal law. So just describe what you do, because if she understands what you do, then you're good, because the law will protect you. And 2, this is clearly corporate bullying. This is clearly big company, little company. And if she relates to you, she's going to protect you, because she's going to realize those 2 things. And it was way more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But that's how it boiled down. And as you can tell, I'm a verbal processor. I'm a talker. I can talk it out. And I sat there and talked. And that judge knew everything about Vortic. She knew everything about me. I handed her my first watch. It said Hamilton. I was wearing a Hamilton. I said, I grew up in Pennsylvania. My dad lives in Hamilton Park. I've been to the Hamilton factory. I have more respect for the Hamilton brand than these attorneys on the other side.
Ooh.
That's what we do. We preserve American history. And I handed her my watch and she got it.
Good.
And she wrote a 40-page document that protects us and protects other people that do similar things. So we protected upcycling. And that's why, I mean, I'm writing a book about this because I think it's so interesting. First of all, that, I feel like the David and Goliath story almost never gets to tell the story because we get snuffed out,
Yeah, squashed.
legally or literally.
Yeah.
Or we just don't have a voice, afterwards because we didn't win.
Right.
And it's way bigger than a pocket watch turned into a wristwatch, which obviously if that was illegal, my entire business plan was wrong. So we would have gone under. But now Hamilton v. Vortic has been referenced. You talk about education.
Yep.
I've had many law students come up and be excited to meet me and talk about the case because that legal case has now been referenced in a lot of other similar things. Basically anything in upcycling. If you take something that's worth almost nothing, but that has a famous or big brand on it, and you turn it into something else, give it a second use. For instance, take a Coca-Cola can that's being recycled and turn it into a lamp. Can Coca-Cola sue you over that? Maybe they could have, but now they can't because, well, anyone can sue anyone over anything.
Right.
But
right.
Hamilton v. Vortic would be referenced to say, well, Vortic was doing that same thing. So if that's okay, then that Coke lamp is probably fine. There are millions of examples like that, and it's really about upcycling. So
interesting. I feel like your guys' case has become like the Campbell Soup's the Warhol case back in the day for artisanship, right? You guys were you guys are basically like the version 2 in that, because you said it's art, right? And that's immediately when you were describing that. I can't remember the name of that court case that's cited for Warhol, but like that's essentially what you guys established. And I'll have a link in the show notes for like the 13 chapters of videos that you guys did from back in that day. If anybody wants to really deep dive into the whole progression of it, because you filled in a lot of gaps for me that I'd missed in that David and Goliath battle. I knew it was a slog, and all of us in the Watch fam, we were all like, we were right behind you. Like we're like, what are you talking about? Like these guys are preserving something, and you're squashing it. You bully. Like we're all pretty pissed. So like,
and thank you, AJ. But I would say the biggest thing I learned through all of that. I mean, I learned a lot about the law because we covered 1% of what I learned there. And to your point, there's a lot to unpack. And there's a lot of similar cases that I think are really fascinating. And I've learned to love the law and use it for good now, mostly to protect myself. And like I said, I want to write a book for those reasons, but also to protect other entrepreneurs like me from making the same mistakes that I did. And one of the biggest mistakes I made, and one of the biggest things I learned, is that I didn't ask for help. And my first big attempt at asking for help was Googling Colorado's best bankruptcy attorney and making it to Rob. I was giving up and accidentally asking for help.
Interesting.
And so that's what I learned. And after I learned that once, I started testing it. And there was an email I sent. I think it was summer 2020. So February, March 2020 was the hardest time in my whole life. Obviously, I was defending myself against, this lawsuit. I was in Manhattan. I came back from that. I left Manhattan. I took a train to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I said goodbye to my mom. I lost her to terminal cancer about a month after I was in court there defending ourselves. And then I got COVID somewhere in
cherry on top.
And they didn't know what to call it. And then of course, COVID kind of shut everything down. And I thought I was gonna win the lawsuit and then lose my watch company, because who's gonna buy a watch in the middle of a global pandemic? Thank God I was wrong. And the watch industry just took off in 2020.
Oh yeah.
But Um, what I was saying is I sent an email, I think it was, yeah, it must have been April, May of 2020. And the subject line was bad things happen in threes.
Yes.
And on that day in 2020, I decided that I was going to ask for help more. Um, and I asked my audience, our at that time, our email list, for help, which at that time was mostly customers. I mean, there's probably 3,000 people on our list, and most of those people are customers.
Mhm.
Um, and something, I don't know what it was. I think one of my friends or one of my like advisors in business or marketing advisors was talking a lot about email marketing and just how powerful it was. And then I was learning a lot more about community growth and
Mhm.
managing a community at that time. Um, and I decided to send an email once a week and use that as a marketing tool through the pandemic to keep
Mhm.
people posted on like, hey, we're here, we're still making watches, you
Yeah,
know, everything's
I
fine.
remember. Yeah.
And I have sent an email every single week for now, I mean, almost 4.5 years
Yeah.
since that time. Um, and last year, for reference, email marketing was attributed to over 70% of Vortic's revenue. Um, and so, like I said, that's what I learned, is to ask for help. And by asking for help, I accidentally created this community of now, I think, 30,000 people on the email list that open that
Wow.
email every week and that I speak to every week and that see our watches every week. And I would not be here if we didn't do that, from a business standpoint, and just from like we wouldn't have sold enough watches to keep going. So,
Wow. Yeah. No, I always enjoy seeing what you guys produce. And I remember one of the chapters of your videos was named "Bad Things Happen in Threes" and stuff. So I mean, that's that. Yeah, I remember that era. So let's segue. Let's make things something a little happy with the time that we got remaining. As we've been chatting, I noticed that there's something on your wrist. What are you wearing today?
yeah, so I'm wearing our new Colorado Watch Company
Yes.
GCT, or the
Oh,
GCT is what we call it. So
oh,
this is a prototype, but we do have final product now, and we've shipped about half of the field watches from our Kickstarter campaign at this point, and we're going to start shipping the GCT watches in about a month.
awesome.
Should have all Colorado Watch Company products shipped by the end of this year, and we'll have full two brands by January, running two watch companies now.
That's awesome. I don't have it, surprisingly enough. I don't have something on wrist because with you, the only thing I could think of that I could wear for this episode, it's not American made, but it is my pocket watch. I have a
Oh,
GSTP
yeah.
from World War II. It's a Doxa.
That's super cool.
Yep. So I you can see the radium burn on the dial.
Yeah,
But anyway, I figured if I was talking to you, this is the one time I'm going to be wristless and actually wear my pocket watch.
I
Uh,
appreciate that, and that's a
yeah.
cool one too. That's the thing about Vortic is, I do all kinds of events, and I
Hmm.
try to get in front of the customers as much as possible. And the thing that I love is when people walk up to me and hand me their grandpa's pocket watch,
Hmm.
and they barely know what we do, and so they want to know more about like how it would work, can we turn it into a wristwatch, all that kind of stuff. But when I can like do all the research and say like this was a Hamilton, it was made here, they made this many, all that stuff. I mean, it makes me feel like I'm part of the family, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the same time, it's like Antiques Roadshow, It's like, oh,
It is. It totally
yours
is.
is worth $5,000.
Dollars.
So, it's just so fun, and the story. I mean, like
The
you talk
stories,
about the
right?
word story, like
Hmm.
everything we make for Vortic especially, but even now with Colorado, like the reason people buy watches and have pocket watches and are in this industry is because everything has a story,
Yep.
like we have a massive supercomputer in our pocket that tells us the time now. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So why buy a watch? Like, well, it's because it has a story and it's meaningful. There's some kind of nostalgia behind it, and it's just a beautiful thing. So yeah, I'm so grateful to be in this industry and get to do what I do. It's wonderful.
So that leads me to where I wanted to go. So the watch that you have on your wrist, there was a little bit of watch spotting that happened about a year ago. I was
Hmm.
watching Amazon Prime, and there's this show called Jack Ryan.
Yeah.
And there was an episode that goes by and he's got a watch on. I see the crown at 12 o'clock and I was like, whoa, pause. And my wife's just like, oh, it's a watch thing. Yes, it's a watch thing. I rewind and I'm like, is that one of our teas? No, no. And so of course I go to the internets, right? And there was entire Reddits like dedicated to like, what is this watch? Is this a Vortic? Like, what is this?
Yep.
True or false? Did you guys plant a watch or is that actually the actor's, like, how that come about? It's one of yours, right?
Yes, that's correct. We have two watches on two different people in the show Jack Ryan.
Oh,
So John Krasinski wore one
yep.
throughout all of season 4, and that's the
Yeah.
one that's become famous. And yeah, there's Reddit threads and there's
Yeah.
whole websites dedicated to it now, which is amazing.
Yep.
But that came about because we got to watch one of our military editions. Is actually my personal military edition, our first edition.
Hmm.
And we got that watch on Michael Kelly in season 3.
Oh, I missed that
Michael
one.
Kelly
Okay.
plays Mike November in the show.
Okay.
And he's like, one of the main actors in the show. And we just trying to make a real long story short. They say it's all about who you know, not what you know. And I know a guy named Mark here in Fort Collins, Colorado, and he is a product placement guy. He's worked in product placement his whole career. He came to me one day and he's like, "Hey, let's try to get some watches on some famous people." And I was like, "Yes, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's so cool." I was just nerding out about the whole process. And he knows the prop masters, and the prop masters are who do the wardrobe and
Mhm.
figure out literally the props on the show.
Yep.
For all kinds of shows. And we've been in a few movies now. The
Hmm.
biggest, thing that we've gotten is now, John Krasinski on Jack Ryan. But
Yeah.
one of the prop masters said, "Hey, we need a military style watch for Michael Kelly for season 3, just for a few shots." You only see it, I think, 3 or 4 times in that season.
That's why I missed it.
He is wearing it most of the season, but it's like, I did the same thing. I'm pausing it every time I
Yeah.
can see Michael Kelly's wrist and see, I'm like trying to figure it out. But I thought that was cool because have you ever seen House of Cards?
Yes. Yeah.
So that was one of my favorite shows. Like I said, I love history.
And a little bit of
Politics
law.
is interesting, but like the drama behind all that stuff is interesting.
Yeah.
I love everything about like the White House and all that. I just
Mhm.
think it's so cool. House of Cards is awesome. And Michael Kelly was Doug Stamper in House of Cards, which I think is one of the best. He was the fixer,
Yeah.
and like the right hand of the president.
Yep.
And I just thought he was the cool, like that role was amazing. And so they were like, "We need to watch for Michael Kelly." And I was like, "Yep, done." And I sent my personal watch. I was like, "This is awesome." And that was our first like attempt. And that was a long time ago at this point. That was 2018, maybe, when they filmed season 3.
Yeah.
And so that went well. It worked. It was cool. And then we got the coolest email we've ever received ever. And it was, "Hey guys, we got a problem. John Krasinski is friends with Michael Kelly. They're co-stars. He saw Michael's watch, loves it, and he wants one for season 4. But we need it like tomorrow in Budapest." So we were like, "Okay."
Done.
We were just finishing up the 3rd edition of our military edition. So that was 2021.
21, 22.
And so we made 2 extras. So that year we made 52. We always make 50. That year we made 52.
Hmm.
And we made 2 specifically for John Krasinski, and they're marked Prop Watch 1 and 2. One of them was the international set, where John Krasinski took it worldwide and, traveled with that watch and all that stuff. And then the other one stayed in the studio in the US. Which is just, there's so much to talk about. Long story short, yeah, in season 4, you can see John Krasinski wearing a Vortic military edition in like 16 or 18 scenes. One of them is like 30 seconds long.
So cool.
And the watch is like front and center.
Yeah.
Best thing that's ever happened. To your point, so many people Google it, and people are still watching that show and seeing it for the first time. And so, yeah, awesome. One of the coolest things that happened. And the best part is they're props. And so we own them. Vortic Watch Company owns those watches. So after they finished filming the show, they sent all of them back. And so Michael Kelly's watch and one of the watches that John Krasinski wore are being auctioned off by Christie's in New York City this December, all for charity. So some of it's going to the Veterans Watchmaker Initiative in Delaware, because we always donate money from each watch to the school in Delaware. Um, and then the rest of it's going to the Lavallee Foundation, which they're hosting the auction, and they basically they do a biannual watch auction. They auctioned off the Pope's
Yeah,
inexpensive watch two
yeah,
years
yeah,
ago.
yeah,
Hodinkee wrote about it. Wall Street Journal wrote about it. It was really cool. That's what they do. They raise money, and a lot of it goes to basically skilled trades and education for people that really need it. So that one's all. Those two are being auctioned off, and then the other one we're doing a sweepstakes for.
I know. I
The
signed up for
largest
that one.
one going around. So yeah, we get to do all kinds of cool stuff, and to fully round out that story, I've sent now Michael Kelly and John Krasinski their own Vortic Military Edition. I
Nice.
saved two from our fourth edition and sent it to them as a gift to say thank you. Least I can do, they
Yeah,
really put us on the map for the military edition, especially. But yeah, to like round that out, it was just the coolest thing, and it's
yeah,
so cool to see your product on TV. It's just wonderful.
that's awesome, dude. So to wrap up, real briefly, so Vortic is still full throttle, bespoke conversion kits. You guys are restoring heritage pieces and such. But then there's the Colorado Watch Co.
Yep.
Same, different. Why?
Yeah. So zooming out, the mission of Vortic Watch Company from the beginning, like we talked about, was trying to make 100% of the watch in the United States. And we do that. I mean, Vortic is a truly American-made product. We have to cheat a little bit because we're using the 100-year-old pocket watch inside. Nobody really makes movements
Hmm.
in the United States at scale. I always add at scale to that because there are wonderful
Yeah,
people like Roland
yeah.
in Pennsylvania, and J.N. Shapiro and my friend Cameron at Weiss Watches,
Weiss. Yeah.
and I'm sure more than I'm forgetting. But that problem is the at scale part, right? Because all of those people I'm mentioning, including Vortic, we can only make a few hundred watches a year. The most watches we've ever made at Vortic in 1 year is almost 400. And the
Right.
wheels started coming off the bus at that point. That's a lot of
Eek.
watches. It's hard to
Yeah.
take a pocket watch, turn in a wristwatch. Um, and so, yeah, Vortic is just a beautiful brand making pocket watches into wristwatches, roughly 300 to 400 watches a year. And we're going to do that for my life.
Awesome.
That's Vortic. Um, and then now Colorado Watch Company, we created because after 10 years, we have the infrastructure to make way more than 300 watches a year. We have 8,000 square feet of manufacturing, millions of dollars worth of CNC machines. And we're making watches in America. But what do we do with that energy, with that plan? We can't do that many pocket watch conversions.
Hmm.
So we discovered a new brand down in Arizona called Fine Timepiece Solutions.
FTS. Yeah.
And FTS Manufacturing, down in Arizona, they're making a movement called the Americron.
Yeah.
And it's not a made in USA movement, but it's an American assembled automatic movement built at scale. And their company is built to scale. And their company's mission, and Kunal down there, who runs that company, is just like me. He wants to make things in America.
Awesome.
So, in a partnership with them, we created Colorado Watch Company, and we currently make the most American watch at scale. We're at about 87% American by cost. That's including the movement. Like I said, the movement's assembled in Arizona using foreign components,
Right.
but it's the closest we can get at this point. And together in a partnership with them, I want to get 1% better every year. So it might take us 13, maybe more years,
Yeah.
but I think we can make, again, at scale, I think we can make all of a watch in the United States. And so Colorado Watch Company are fully modern watches, a little bit smaller. We can make a
Which
40
cool.
and a 42. We're doing the field watch and the GCT to get started. But the premise of Colorado Watch Company is basically the question of why let the Swiss have all the fun? Let's
Yes.
right here, and let's make a lot of them.
I'm going to correct something. You say you think you can do it. I know you can do it. Honestly, like if there's
I
there,
appreciate that.
I mean, if there's any company that I've chatted with, like you're it. Like it may take you 13 years, 15 years. By the time your kiddos are driving, and that's going to be mortifying. Maybe that should be the
That's the
benchmark,
goal.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but no, I look forward to seeing that. My one question, I actually have two questions. One is my final question I always ask at the end of the show, but my other question is, so here in the Pacific Northwest, I climb, I hike, I dive. regularly. Matter of fact, I dove last weekend. I'm hitting another dive this weekend up north in BC. One of the things that's missing in the Vortic lineup is a dive watch. And you said, like, you were working on, getting water resistance in those early stages. Is there going to be a Vortic with a turnable bezel someday?
Short answer, yes.
Yes.
Long answer, and so Vortic
Yeah.
at this point is a parent company, right?
Okay.
So I have Vortic Inc. and then I have Vortic Watch Company, and
Mhm.
Vortic Watch Company is pocket watches turned into
Oh,
wristwatches.
my mistake.
That's it.
Colorado Watch Company. Is Colorado Watch Company going to have one with a turning bezel?
Colorado Watch Company will have a dive watch at some point.
Yes.
That is not the current focus of the company. Like I said,
Damn.
current focus of the company. I don't know. Current focus of the company is as American as possible.
Understand.
Mostly to prove to the world that A, it's possible,
Yes.
and B, that consumers want it.
Yes.
So in my Kickstarter, when Tyler and I filmed that Kickstarter for Colorado Watch Company,
Yeah. Last year.
I asked you and the consumers to vote with your wallet.
Mhm.
And if you want an American watch at scale, which at this point I like to use Henry Ford's definition of American made, which is make enough that your employees can afford one too.
Got it.
So we are trying to make enough that we can make it at an attainable cost, and it's still over 1,000, but
It is.
It's something that I hope people are willing to invest in. You're not just buying a watch; you're investing in the future of American manufacturing. That's what I continue to say. But as part of that investment, you're helping us get started, right? So we have a field watch that's water resistant to 100 meters. Now we have the GCT, which is what I'm wearing,
Which is awesome.
Down, water resistant to 150 meters.
Mm-hmm.
The water resistance wasn't really the point of those watches. It was just to prove that we can and make really cool stuff that people want to invest in and buy.
Agreed.
The third watch that we're going to make doesn't have a timeline yet. We're not sure. There's a lot of stuff that has to get done. But the third watch, we're going to be a little smaller. I want to make a smaller, manually wound because, like I said, vintage watches are popular. People want a thin watch. People want more of a dress watch. Like, we're getting a lot of questions for that. And the number one thing that I want to do with Colorado Watch Company, I talk to the team about this all the time, is I want to be a consumer-driven business. So
awesome.
I only want to make something if we know the consumers want it. And I think that's a big mistake that a lot of watch companies make. Is they make something that they think is cool or that one really loud customer said they could make.
Yeah.
It's like, no, the goal is to make a lot. So we got to find a lot of customers and say, hey, what do you guys want?
Right.
And everybody wants a smaller watch.
Fair.
So that's the third one. And then, the fourth one will be something similar to what you're looking for. The timeline is total unknown. It really depends on how people buy the watch that we have now.
Understand. No, I had Etienne Malik from Baltic Watches on the show an episode or two ago, depending on when this one drops. And that's something he also said is that was a core ethos of his business in Baltic is just, you do you, I think that's strong. But RT, if you ever need a Pacific Northwest diver to put something through its paces, just send me a proto. I may make it flood or not, whatever you need.
Well, let's get a GCT on your wrist and test the water resistance of our most water resistant watch.
Happy to do it.
It's not made for diving, but let's put it under the water and find out. It's a screw down crown. I want to know.
You got it.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
So RT, my last question that I always wrap up every show with the Analog Explorer is, especially with you, and I'm really curious on how you're going to answer this. Is, I knew Tyler's background in the golf green and such, but you you weren't really a watch pest. You weren't really watch fam until this all budded. So my question is always, why watches?
I don't say this often because I run a watch company and I don't want someone to take it the wrong way. But I'm not a watch person.
That's fair. That's fine.
I don't care about Rolex and Omega and the next watch that they just made and all that stuff. And a lot of our customers come up and ask me if I saw the new thing that this one Swiss company just dropped, and I haven't. That's not my thing.
That's fair.
I was raised by two Mad Men. If you ever watched that show,
Yep.
My parents were advertising executives at Leo Burnett in Chicago, which is one of the best advertising agencies in the world. And my mom worked on the Pepsi account, and she flew around the world doing Pepsi ads. They got to go to the Super Bowl every year for free. My dad helped write the jingle for the Big Mac, 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. To me, marketing is everything. It's nostalgia, it's story, it's the why behind how we make decisions. I don't get emotional very often. There are really 2 things that make me tear up, besides when, my kids do something really cute or they come screaming to the door, daddy, 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 that'll get you every time.
Always.
But like in real world, regular life, one of them is those damn videos of U.S. military veterans coming home safe and hugging their dogs and hugging their kids and their wives. God, that gets me every time.
Respect.
And that has nothing to do with marketing, but I just wanted to say that because I just think that's so important. And the other one is a really good advertisement. And it's nostalgia for me, like I just grew up with that. We muted the football game. I call it sports ball now. My team makes fun of me. I don't watch any sports.
Awesome.
But my family would mute the football game and we would just talk and have popcorn and hang out, like especially on the Super Bowl. And we would watch and rewind and rewatch the ads. And my parents would tell me like everything about the ads and, all the reasoning behind like what their target audience was and why Coke said this and why Pepsi said this and where this was going. And so, yeah, to answer your question, why watches? I like to say I run a company whose purpose is to manufacture something that you don't need and sell it for thousands of dollars. That's really cool. Like the only way I can sell you a watch is if I tell you a story, is if my marketing is good. Watch companies aren't manufacturing companies. Ours is. Yeah. Most of them aren't.
No.
Ours is almost by accident because we take pocket watch tournament wristwatches and it sucks. I wouldn't recommend it. It's really freaking hard to do what we do. And so we had to build out manufacturing and do it in-house because nobody else would touch us.
No.
And I happen to study engineering. So thank God, like I have that core skill and I can like help. But our company, especially, just like most watch companies, is a marketing company. And God, it is fun. Every day there's a new story. There's a new piece of history that we get to write content about. I do a YouTube show where I talk about stories of history and document everything. Like when you asked about the lawsuit, the only thing that kept me going during that lawsuit and where I didn't give up, except that one time where I made that Google search and thankfully ended up in the right place, was the fact that I just love what we do. And it's not because I love watches. It's because I love the stories that they tell. I love the stories that our customers tell. Our customers bring us family heirlooms and we turn them into wristwatches and those have stories. We take pocket watches that were flown on B-17s in World War II when we were bombing the Nazis and we turn those into wristwatches. I don't have to tell you any of the specs of my watch. How
Doesn't matter.
It keeps time and how the power reserve. Nobody cares.
Nope.
What did this watch do? Why does the customer want to buy it? What story does it tell to them? What story will it tell on their wrist? And by the time I get done with the story of like, this is why we do what we do and this is how we do what we do, you just want to buy a watch.
Absolutely.
And it's fun. And that's really the bottom line is I've become a watch guy for our watches and American watches in particular, because it's fun and it's still fun and the stories are what make it fun.
Awesome, RT. Thanks so much.
Thanks, AJ. This is fun.